A lot of people would argue that Batman villains such as the Joker and the Riddler don't actually suffer from any mental illness, that they're just plain assholes fully in control of their actions. Well, one Bat-rogue pretty much everyone will agree is mentally ill is Two-Face. Here's the guy who can't even make a decision without flipping a coin. Clearly he suffers from something. But what? What mental disorder is Two-Face supposed to have? Well, first I want to cover what he doesn't have, because there seems to be a great misconception about Harvey Dent's diagnosis. We frequently see Two-Face referred to as schizophrenic or a schizoid. And this is not just by fans in casual conversation, this happens a lot in actual comics published by DC Comics. So when I said in my last video that comic book writers aren't psychiatrists, and nor do they pretend to be, well, it's certainly true. Two-Face is not schizophrenic or a schizoid. These are two different disorders, by the way, which the comic book writers probably don't even realize. So what is schizophrenia? Schizophrenia is a mental illness primarily characterized by hallucinations and delusions. People with this disorder will see and hear things that aren't really there, and they'll believe in bizarre things that aren't true, like for instance that they're a witch, or Jesus, or that the government is stalking them. They're completely convinced that all this stuff is real too, and convincing them otherwise is extremely difficult to say the least. Does this sound like Two-Face? No, not really. So what's a schizoid or schizoid personality disorder? Well, despite having a very similar name to schizophrenia, it's actually quite different. Hallucinations and delusions are not involved. Instead, it's a disorder characterized by feelings of apathy, a strong desire for solitude, a disinterest in any activities, and being emotionally cold. Does that sound like Two-Face? No, not even close. So what does Two-Face actually have? He has a split personality, right? I think we can all agree on that. Well, what is that disorder called? It's called Dissociative Identity Disorder, or DID, formerly known as Multiple Personality Disorder. That is the real-life mental disorder that resembles Two-Face's condition the most. As you've probably guessed, this disorder means you have two or more identities within the same person. These identities are referred to as alters, and the person will switch between these alters, basically becoming a different person. Amnesia is a common symptom with DID, as commonly the different identities are not aware of each other's actions. When one identity takes command, the others are typically dormant and completely unaware of what's going on. So, in other words, a person with DID can walk around and do stuff and then have no memory of it at all. We've specifically seen this happen with Two-Face in some comics, although of course it all depends on which version we're talking about. Just like the Joker and the Riddler, Two-Face is constantly depicted inconsistently, and some versions match up with DID very well, while some don't at all. Two-Face is split between two identities, one good and one bad. In real life, people with DID usually have numerous identities, the average being around 15, but cases of just two identities do exist. These identities aren't really separated by good and evil, that's a typical fiction thing. People with DID don't have evil personalities. Well, I mean, not commonly anyway. It is possible, of course, to have a quote-unquote evil alter. After all, there are documented cases of people with DID committing crimes, such as the case with Billy Milligan. He committed robberies and rapes and blamed those crimes on two of his alters. But normally people with DID don't have a higher risk of crime and violence than anyone else. How does DID come about? DID is caused by severe trauma during childhood, such as abuse or other extremely traumatic early experiences. The mind will create the alters to basically absorb the trauma to protect the main identity. The main identity will hide behind the alters, and in a lot of cases be made completely unaware any abuse took place. This is the function of the alters for a small child without a fully developed sense of identity. While it may help during those traumatic early times, the disorder or the alters have the side effect of sticking around into adulthood, upon which they can become a problem. Two-Face's origin story fits the criteria for DID perfectly, as he experienced abuse at the hands of his drunken father while a young child. The evil persona, his alter, was created to protect Harvey from his father's abuse. It is very possible that Harvey's alter grew bitter and resentful from having to absorb the abuse, which is why he ended up becoming a violent criminal. He's lashing out at the world that wronged him. And we've specifically seen in some comics the evil alter express intense hatred for the father, while the good Harvey identity have expressed love for him. That is a very interesting take on the bad side of Two-Face. He shouldn't just be pure evil for no real reason like a cartoon villain, especially not if you want to portray DID in a more realistic fashion. The mean, angry alter should have a motivation for his wicked actions. And taking on all that abuse from Harvey's drunken father is a very good one. Naturally, he would grow up to be hateful. After all, a lot of criminals in real life, including serial killers, suffered abuse growing up. It may feel like a cliché in fiction, but it's a cliché for a reason, because it's actually real. Violence breeds more violence. I think Harvey Dent's DID diagnosis is pretty clear-cut. A problem arises when we get to the coin, though. We know Two-Face can't decide between good and evil without flipping his trusty scarred coin. So what is that all about? Is that another symptom of DID? No, it's not. If anything, it seems to resemble OCD, obsessive-compulsive disorder, more. We've seen how Harvey gets when he loses his coin after all. He has a complete mental breakdown and can't even function. He needs the coin and will get intense anxiety when he can't flip it. I don't know if such a case exists in real life, but if it does, it's certainly not the common expression of OCD. There is also dependent personality disorder. Two-Face's coin dependency fits one of the symptoms of that disorder, which is to be unable to make decisions by yourself without the advice or guidance by others. Perhaps instead of depending on other people's opinions, Two-Face depends on the coin. However, he doesn't fit the other symptoms of this disorder, which are, among others, a clingy personality and a fear of being abandoned. So I don't think Two-Face has dependent personality disorder. DID for sure, of course, with OCD. The OCD could also explain his obsession with the number 2 and duality. Everything has to be split evenly down the middle in contrasting styles and colors, from his outfits to even the decors of his hideouts. That's pushing your so-called theme pretty far, pretty much to obsessive levels of insanity. So, do you agree with my diagnosis for Harvey Dent, or do you feel he actually suffers from something else, or nothing at all? Let me know down in the comments. And see you in the madhouse next time.